Hi, welcome to Muqaddimah. My name is Syawish. For almost 800 years, the Iberian Peninsula existed as a pocket of Islamic civilization away from the Middle East in Europe. Islamic civilization thrived there and connected the Islamic world to Europe, opening the way for exchange of ideas. It created not just one but two golden ages, the golden age of the Caliphate of Cordoba and the golden age of the Sephardic Jews. It was an abode of tolerance and collaboration. Slowly but steadily, the Muslim polities were pushed off the Iberian Peninsula and sent packing to North Africa. After this, the Muslim population was told to convert, leave, or die. This fascinating story is too often told from a religious point of view, the clash of two great religions, the victory of Christianity over Islam. However, the story is more complicated than that. Muslims often allied with Christians against other Muslims, and Christians often allied with Muslims against other Christians. While religion certainly played a part, this conflict should be seen as a conflict between ambitious people coveting more and more power by any means necessary. Another simplistic view of the collapse of Muslim Iberia is that the Muslims were too decadent, bogged down by harems full of women and chalices full of wine. But again, the story is much more complicated than that. So let's take a look at some of the reasons behind the fall of Muslim Iberia. Okay, so I know that a lot of you, like myself, play Crusader Kings III. So I'm very happy to announce that I've partnered with Paradox Interactive, the people behind Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis, to tell you that a new flavor pack is coming on the 31st of this month, May. It's called Fate of Iberia, and it deals with the struggle in Iberia that happened between the Muslim Emirates and the Christian kingdoms. As the people at Paradox Interactive always do, they have treated the subject with incredible historical accuracy and nuance, which I think is usually lacking from most discussions regarding the Reconquista. So if you want to learn more about the interaction between the Islamic Emirates and the Christian kingdoms in Iberia, you should check out Fate of Iberia. Click the link in the description or in the pinned comment to check out Fate of Iberia. Let's start like Fate of Iberia does in 867. At the time, we saw what I think was sort of a trailer for the ultimate fate of Muslim empires in Iberia. Since 852, Emir Muhammad ibn Abdurrahman had been ruling the Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba. Ever since starting his reign, Muhammad had had to put out fires left, right, and center. There were many reasons, most of which stayed relevant from then on to 1492. At the time, the biggest problem was the discontent among the Muwallad. The Muwallad were Muslims of Iberian or mixed Iberian and Arab or North African descent. Between 800 CE and 950 CE, a large number of Iberian locals converted to Islam. Despite popular belief, Muslim empires didn't really want non-Muslims to convert because they extracted extra taxes from non-Muslims. So when they converted to Islam, the state revenue took a hit. In addition to that, the Muwallad began resenting the ruling Arab elites. During Muhammad's reign, there were various rebellions from them as well as other groups. Taking advantage of the instability, the Christian kings to the north supported some of the rebels and even allied with them. This was pretty much the first time that, on a large scale, the Muslim emirate in Iberia had faced a challenge from within. Disunity among Muslims was a big factor in the collapse of Muslim Iberia, and this was basically where that started. The emirate actually stayed in a state of relative anarchy till Muhammad's great-grandson Abdurrahman III ascended to the throne in 912 CE. The thing with the locals converting to Islam and then rising up was seen throughout the Islamic world as a reason for the fall of many empires, from Spain to Baghdad and even India. While Abdurrahman III and his son Al-Hakam II were able to keep things together, the deep-rooted problems didn't go away. After the death of Al-Hakam II in 976, his young son, Hisham II, ascended to the throne. He was only around 10 years of age, and he became a puppet. Meanwhile, different Arab, North African, and Muwallad factions at the court kept fighting to gain influence. This resulted in the fracturing of the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba and its official end in 1031 CE. This was the beginning of the end. The former Umayyad territory was divided into 10 or so smaller emirates, some ruled by Arabs, some by Muwallad, all fighting for control. For this, they often allied with Christian kings who were also looking at the opportunity to expand south. There was no unified Muslim power to resist Christian advances, and Toledo fell in 1085 to King Alfonso VI of Castile. This marks a very important point in the struggle between the Muslims and the Christians. Toledo gave Castile a foothold in Muslim territory across the Tagus River. Islamic polities on Iberia were now on borrowed time. The ruler of the Emirate of Seville appealed to the Almoravid Sultan across the Strait of Gibraltar. There, the Amazigh Empire of the Almoravid and their ambitious ruler, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, had made a name for themselves by quickly conquering almost all of northwestern Africa from Algeria to Ghana. Yusuf ibn Tashfin invaded, but instead of helping the Emirates, he conquered them. For around a century, the Almoravid ruled Muslim Spain until they were overthrown by the Almohad in 1147. Almohad were also an Amazigh empire, and they also conquered Iberia. Between the Almoravids and the Almohad, there was another period of small emirates fighting for control while the Christians pushed south. Independent emirs often allied with the Christians to obtain more power. The Almohad themselves began declining and were pushed off the Iberian Peninsula in the 1210s and 1220s. Cordoba fell in 1236 and Seville in 1248. The only Islamic emirate left on the peninsula then was the Nasrid Emirate of Granada. From around 1230 to 1492, the Nasrid Emirate of Granada kept shrinking. The biggest reason was that it was terribly unstable. You might get an idea of that from the fact that in just around 250 years, they had 13 rulers named Muhammad alone. During this time, the Nasrid were often allied with the Castilians or the Aragonese. They also tried to expand by taking advantage of Christian kingdoms fighting each other, but that didn't really work well. Finally, in 1482, the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella started the final push against Granada, which ended with the fall of Granada in 1492, completely ending Muslim political presence on the Iberian Peninsula. So let's now take a look at why exactly Muslim empires failed to defend against Christians in Iberia. The first problem was that after the fall of the Umayyad dynasty, both the Almoravids and the Almohad didn't think of their Iberian holdings as the core of the empire. For them, Morocco came first. That's not to say that they didn't try to defend Muslim Iberia. They did, but they had significant problems. They didn't want to draw any large number of soldiers from Morocco to defend Muslim Spain. For that, they relied on local soldiers, of which there weren't many. Due to reforms by the Umayyads, locals were excluded from the military, which mostly relied on Amazigh soldiers from North Africa, and the Saqaliba, likely Slavic, slave soldiers. Hugh Kennedy best summarized this as the following. This situation meant that there was a large non-military civilian population in Al-Andalus, untrained in warfare and unequipped. They relied on the professional soldiers to defend them, and when, with the collapse of the Caliphate, the Almoravids or the Almohad, these professional soldiers were no longer available, the local people could not mount a successful resistance. Along with this concentration of military power in a caste of professional soldiers went the concentration of political power in the hands of the rulers. Under the Umayyads, the lords of the marches had considerable autonomy and the power to lead defensive and offensive campaigns on their own initiative. Under the Almoravids and the Almohad, such local initiatives ceased to be possible. This is especially true under the centralized Almohad Caliphate, when the prolonged absences of the caliphs effectively paralyzed both offensive and defensive war efforts. Christian Spain and Portugal during this period have been described as a society organized for war. The Christians seem to have been able to mobilize a much higher proportion of their population for warfare in royal armies, in the armies of military orders, and in the armies of the towns. The gulf between the military castes and the rest of the population did not exist. Furthermore, there were many different centers of command. Not only were there 3 or 4 frontier monarchies, but there were military orders, nobles as followings, and town armies with their own command structures, capable of independent action. Muslim society had no equivalent of an adventurer like Giraldo Sempavor or military forces like the aggressive and effective military of Avila in the second half of the 12th century. If royal power was enfeebled by minority or civil wars, as in Castile after 1157, there were others who could and did assume a leadership role. Both the Almoravid and the Almohad came from the desert, and they were hardened warriors. They could face anyone in the open field, but they couldn't lay siege to castles and cities. They simply didn't have the infrastructure to supply prolonged sieges. They would have to draw resources from Morocco, which itself wasn't exactly popular for its agricultural produce. So after the fall of Toledo in 1085, with minor exceptions here and there, when the Muslims lost a city or castle, they simply couldn't recover it. As a result, valuable strategic assets were lost forever. When the Muslims initially conquered Iberia in 711 CE, they had pushed the Christian kingdoms to the northern mountains, where everything south of the Ebro and Tagus rivers belonged to the Umayyads, while everything north belonged to the various Christian kings. These borders were sustainable and were easy to protect for the Muslims, but once Toledo fell, the Castilians were inside Muslim territory. It could have been reversed if the Almoravid had the ability to lay siege and take Toledo, but, well, the Almoravid just couldn't do that. From then on, the Christian kingdoms kept chipping away city by city, fort by fort, with no way to stop them. Another major curse on Muslim Iberia was that from around 1100 CE or so, Muslim Iberia was hemorrhaging people. The increased instability and Christian threat led to those who could afford to leave leaving. This included many prominent families like the Banu Khaldun, the ancestors of the famous scholar Ibn Khaldun. They had ruled Seville at one point but had left Iberia probably in the early 1200s to settle in Tunisia. These skilled immigrants boosted the Almoravid and Almohad empires while contributing to the decay of Muslim Iberia. The Almohad even encouraged immigration to Morocco. As a result, there weren't many people left to fight for and administer Muslim Iberia. So, to summarize, in my opinion, Iberia was simply too different from the Middle East for Arabs to rule properly. Arab rule had largely relied on an elite military class which existed at some social distance from the general population. In the East, Muslim empires were able to keep the military elite class supplied with a constant influx of slave soldiers. In the West, that wasn't possible on as large a scale as was needed. After the collapse of the Umayyad Caliphate, the smaller emirates simply didn't have the resources to muster up the military force that they needed to defend against Christian North. Also, Muslims weren't exactly used to ruling a dense urban population. While the Arab Umayyads got used to it, the Almoravids and the Almohad never really did. As a result, they weren't able to prop up good bureaucratic systems that were suited for an urban population. In the East, the Arabs solved this problem by learning from the Persians who had had urban empires for centuries. The Turks did the same. The Iberians didn't. The fact that there was only one major Muslim empire on the Iberian Peninsula at any given point was also quite a problem. The Christians to the north had various frontier kingdoms like Castile, Aragon, and Leon. Even if one was weak or unstable, the other two would have the stability to attack the south. But when the Umayyads, the Almoravids, or the Almohad became unstable, there was simply no other Muslim emirate to keep the Christians in check. The fall of the Umayyad Caliphate had something of a snowball effect. As instability became more commonplace, people started leaving, which made things more unstable. As someone who was educated in Pakistan and moved to the West, I feel very guilty right now. At the end of the day, there were too many major and minor factors that contributed to the collapse of Muslim Iberia. If you think you could have done better, like I mentioned before, you can try your hand at it with Crusader Kings III's upcoming flavor pack, Fate of Iberia. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment. May Allah guide you and watch over your emirate. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon. On the screen right now, you can see the names and tiers of the patrons. You can join them by pledging $1 or more to support the channel. Thank you for watching.